Welcome to the Resiliency of the Human Spirit podcast, where we share all about human triumphs for the collective's healing and empowerment. I am your host, Priscilla Hanley. My guest today is Roger Morimoto. Roger is a spiritual researcher and the founder of the Spiritual Life Foundation located in the San Francisco Bay Area. He retired from the United Methodist ministry after 36 years in ministry. He touches on several topics, including but not limited to spirituality and science, psychic phenomena, energy healing, Reiki, the Enneagram as an energy model, extraterrestrial, UFO, the CE5 phenomena, as well as the Christian Gnostic movement as a metaphysical movement. I'm going to bring Roger on right now. Hi, Roger.
Hi, Priscilla.
How are you doing today?
Doing great. This is very exciting. Very happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you because you have very interesting topics and I love your focus areas. We have pretty much the same interests. So I want to get started right away. Go ahead. Please tell us your story and your journey and how everything started for you to get you to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I did retire a couple years ago from the United Methodist Church, but all of this actually started, I think, for me really when I was in high school. Um, in high school, my father had developed a heart problem and heart disease, and that somewhat limited him. But my mother, who was a nurse, uh, and was also connected in with some folks in the Japanese American community here in the Bay Area, uh, came upon Reiki. And so this was back in the 1970s. So it's very early on in the Reiki movement in the US. And so she came upon Reiki. There was a couple families and that were in this area. And so that was my first sort of exposure to sort of holistic health as it was put back in those days. And so that sort of formed some initial background. And then I went off to college. I went to UC Berkeley, and while I was in Berkeley, um, I'm going off to college, and my mother is now not only getting into Reiki, but now she is getting into anything and everything that comes along that's somewhat related. She's getting into psychic phenomena, going to psychics. She's calling me, telling me what's going on with my life. When I know that she doesn't know these things because I am not telling her who I'm dating or what I'm doing,
Oh, wow.
and she would just tell me these things. So it piqued my interest. So I began to explore some of this on my own, especially being in Berkeley. There is the exposure as well. Every time I walked down off to class, I went down Telegraph Avenue. There was the tarot reader sitting on the corner. He would be he was a blind tarot card reader, and it was such a classic Berkeley thing. And I would stop and I would talk to him. I would check out some of the other unique bookstores in that area. But that sort of was really the beginning, and I really began to explore that. And then as I neared the end of my undergraduate major. My major was chemical engineering. I was studying to become a chemical engineer, and that exposed me in my upper division to quantum physics. And as I delved into quantum physics, I really began to ponder. I almost saw it like as a philosophical opening, and because it was really saying that the nature of our reality was not physical, a physical realm, a physical universe. It was beyond that, and and I began to really ponder that. And one of the books that really spoke to me at that time was a book called I had it here somewhere. Mysticism and the New Physics, and it was by Michael Talbot. And I think you could still purchase that like on Amazon. But that really spoke to me, and it kind of just opened me up to a sense that there really was another way to look at the nature of our reality. And I was very much drawn into that. And to the degree that in my last quarter before graduation, I had decided, I want to explore this. I was going to explore it more like a hobby, and I decided, no, I'm going to just throw my whole self into it. But I needed to find a way to, in a sense, make a living. I was very involved in the Japanese American Christian church community, and so I tried to wed these two things together, serving in the community through the church, and then that would free me up and perhaps give me some access to questions about religion and spirituality, and where those concepts meet science. And so I thrust myself into the United Methodist ministry with the intention of serving in the Japanese American Christian church context. But at the same time, the backdrop was always this question of science and spirituality, and really wanting to explore that. And so that's what I did. And I would say the first half of my ministry was probably more wrapped up in uh, serving the church, serving the community. In the second half, I was able to then get back to this deeper exploration of spirituality and science. And so that's essentially it's been my journey. And now that I'm retired, I'm able to really fully lean into it in a deeper way.
Okay, you talked about the quantum, and I'm a really big fan of the quantum. So, what is one memorable thing that you learn about quantum that can help us in our own healing and evolution?
Yeah, so the term quantum, I think, is now used in a lot of ways to reflect a how do I put it? I think to reflect a transformative way to look at um, the way things work in the world, or energy, or spirit. And so quantum physics, really what it began to do was it it was beginning to tell us again, like that the things that we thought were physical are not physical. It's all energy. Everything is energy. In fact, not only is it energy, but there's a natural process, or the very nature of the universe that we live in, that we are a part of, is that we're just not physical. And the quantum physics was also beginning to tell us that there's uh, or our own observation of ourselves or of the universe transforms the very thing that we're observing. So in science, it created a dilemma, because in science, you wanted the ability to observe something, analyze it, and then you could theorize about it. But if you observe something and then you change it, that's going to really create the process of analysis. Creates a big problem for science, because every time they're observing it, it's changing.
Right.
And so it's, in a sense, really bringing in this sense that there's a consciousness behind every interaction that happens in the universe. There is this deeper consciousness. And so our own consciousness affects the things that we observe. It affects things outside of ourselves, and it affects things within ourselves. And so I think, and it was sort of like science beginning to affirm, like, okay, meditation is going to make a difference. I meant your frame of mind, the way that the energy that you have inside your body, inside your mind, inside your emotions, all of those things are going to have an effect not only on you, but literally on the world itself, in the universe. And that's really, I think, what quantum physics was beginning to open this door. Now, it created great problems for science, because it just made it practically impossible to really speak to, doing the traditional analysis of how we observe and understand the world in which we live.
So I have a radical question when you're talking about science and quantum physics. So with things changing as we observe, right? Does that then make science inaccurate, in your opinion?
I would say good science is always open to the understanding that what we know is only what we know up to that point. And then as we discover things, the science will sort of expand the question. That's good science. And then there's science that locks in and says
Correct.
what we know is what we know forever.
Correct.
And we know that that's not good science. I mean, that's just setting you up for, so that's sort of dogmatic science. So I don't think science is invalidated as much as and maybe we're talking about scientific processes here, but I don't think it's invalidated as much as it's forced to push to new edges. I will say though that on a certain level, when we think of the word physics is about the physical dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so the study of physics, and this is really the difficulty that I think physicists are having, is that in a sense they push to their limit, which is the physical dimension. And now the theories that are explaining um, the nature of that physical dimension are saying there's a reality that is beyond that physical dimension. And so in that way, they've hit this funny limit where, they won't be able to, science always wants to confirm and affirm, what they theorize. They will not be able to do that because they could only do that in the physical dimension. So we
Right.
we talked about quantum physics, but really, for myself, what's really intriguing at this time is the whole string theory or multi-string theory, or what they call M theory, and because the mathematics of string theory basically is basically saying that for the math to work out, um, that we basically live in either a 11 dimensional space, or we infinite dimensional space, depending on which of the M theories you're going to adhere to. But they're basically saying that the nature of our reality is multidimensional,
Mm-hmm.
or as sometimes they talk about it in terms of multidimensional, sometimes they talk about it in terms of the multiverse.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's so fascinating. So after you retired from the ministry, so what happened next for you after you retired?
I was beginning to draw some of this, all of these things that I was interested. I was beginning to draw this into the work, but the work I was doing in the church, and it wasn't always deeply appreciated by my higher ups. And so once I retired, then I was able to sort of lean into it a little more deeply. And basic, when I say lean into it, I it just means that I try to gather folks that want to talk about this, or that want to engage these concepts. And whether there's a lot of different things I do. It's only been 2 years or 2.5 years since I've retired. So, but more recently we started having some gatherings, and I'll bring out psychic mediums, and I have a channeler coming up in my next our next gathering. I call it a gathering of community. And I think what I'm really trying to do is just kind of expose people to these ideas, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's really up to them if it sticks, or if it's something that they find interesting. I'm not trying to persuade anyone of anything. I just want them to, though, be open, so that and if they experience something and they want to explore it, then something in them will push them further. And I'm just trying to create those opportunities. I call it more like a playground. I'm trying to create a playground environment where people could come and play with this stuff, so it's not so serious and thus not so scary. And as they tinker with it, uh, then they'll begin to find their own path as they work with it. All of us, I believe, have our own path in terms of what it is we are meant to do
Mm-hmm.
here, and who we come across, and who's going to be part of that in our lives, and just trying to create a open space, a safe space for people to make those engagements.
That's wonderful. I think you're doing such profound work because what you're essentially doing is really expanding people's consciousness, right?
Right, that's what I'm
Open,
hoping to do. Right.
yeah, opening them up to spirituality, understanding that there is more, in our physical life, right? There's not more out there, it's more like here within
Yeah,
us,
both,
right?
right? Both
Yeah,
out there and in here,
that's
and
true,
it's,
that's true.
yeah. I use the metaphor of the physical. To me, the physical realm, the universe as we know it, or as we think we know it, um is like a house, and
Mhm.
everyone lives in this house. It's a huge house. Like, recently I went to South Korea, so that's like going to another room in that house,
Oh,
and you speak
yes.
a different language. The culture is different and everything. So I've never been. There's so many places in the house that I haven't been, but
Mm-hmm.
most people in the house believe that that's all there is just the inside of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what I think is the nature of reality is we're realizing there's an outside, and that outside is not only outside, but it's huge. It's so much bigger than even the house, despite how big the house is. And some people kind of look through the window, or they're able to scrape through, and could sort of see some haziness, like, yeah, there's more here. And some people actually could astral travel out into that realm and come back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some people are clairaudient and they hear things. I know there's an out there because it's speaking to me. Some see it, there's some feel it. It's just I really think that's what I'm trying to do, is just trying to encourage people to just look outside.
I understand that you have expeditions to Joshua Tree. So can you elaborate more about that?
Okay, sure. Joshua Tree, most people, when you mention Joshua Tree, they think of the Joshua Tree National Park. And if people never been there, it's really a unique place. The landscape, it's part of the California High Desert, about 2 hours outside, east of Los Angeles. And so when you mention Joshua Tree, that's what people think of. But what drew me to Joshua Tree was not so much just the national park, but it was actually a trip that I had taken some folks to Big Island in Hawaii.
Oh,
And yeah, so we went to Big Island to look at one of our friends' property. He had 6 acres out on the Big Island that he's had for like over 30 years, but he also just retired recently, about the same time I did. And I was telling him what I was doing. He said, "Hey, I got this property out there. Let's go take a look." And I gathered about a half a dozen of us. We went out there and checked out his property. But when we got to his property, it was, if you could imagine, it was 6 acres of lava rock. And what I mean by that is he had actually, it was on an old lava bed in the south of the Big Island. And if you're familiar with lava rock that goes in your barbecue, and
okay.
it's really rough um and hard, and basically he had 6 acres of that.
Oh,
And
wow.
right, right. And in my mind, I was thinking we're going out to lush Hawaii, and we're going to create this, retreats place in this lush farm, just, you know,
Right.
yeah. But no, I thought, wow, this is, and I realized we're thinking about this all wrong. We shouldn't be thinking about lush Hawaiian farm, but we really should be thinking about the desert. It
Mm,
had the energy to me of being in the desert, like, and he talked about this land really having energy and power and spirit. And they'll talk about Pele,
mm, mhm.
and so, and I would say yes, so you could feel it. You're there and you could just sort of just feel that. So I told him, I said, we're just thinking about this differently. We need to be thinking in terms of the desert, and there's folks that have, worked with, I knew people had worked with geometric structures and architecture, and he is an architect. So it's like I was trying to encourage him to think and work in that realm. I went to sleep that night after I had told him that, and in the middle of the night, I had this dream, and the image of this building, this white dome building, came to me. I had seen it before in pictures, but at the time, I thought it was Buckminster's Fuller's geodesic dome. But when I looked that up, it wasn't that. It was like, oh,
Mm.
that's not it. And then as I kept looking around, I saw it, and it was the Integratron in Joshua Tree.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so I had this dream, and then I started to Google the Integratron, and I learned the story of George Van Tassel, of Giant Rock, and I just said to myself, it was like, this is a couple days after I'd come back from Hawaii. I just said, okay, I gotta go.
Mm.
I gotta go. And this is where that started. And at about the same time as well, our little subgroup that we call Ancient New Way, and one of the topics that this group looks at is the question of extraterrestrial life. Um, there was a friend of mine, or a member of the group, was just also heading off to go hear Stephen Greer talk about his CE5 programs. And we will talk about that in a little bit, but um, and so that sort of coincided with me wanting to go out to Joshua Tree, because part of I think the work that Stephen Greer has done has been in the Joshua Tree area,
Mm.
because again, it's that high desert area. And the other thing it made me think about was the early Christian mystics who often went out to the Egyptian desert and lived in the
Mm-hmm.
caves. And it made me realize that, yeah, there is some power or something about being in the desert that probably opens up the psychic channels and connections. And so all of those things kind of dovetail together, and it was like, okay, I got to go to Joshua Tree. I put out a little email and my newsletter, and about 20 of us went out to check out Joshua Tree, went to the national park, but we also went to the Integratron and then Giant Rock. And those two things, the Giant Rock and the Integratron, are uh, are are linked together. They really are one and the same experience. Giant Rock is just 3 miles outside of the location of the Integratron, on this dirt road, and it's such a unique story in a unique place. So
Oh,
that's how it got me to go to Joshua Tree.
oh, wow. I think Joshua Tree and the Integratron was calling to you,
it
right?
was it was calling to me.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind. It was calling to me. And because and I just think it's wonderful that it called to me through Hawaii. And because I really didn't see it coming. I had, prior to that, I really did not have Joshua Tree on my radar at all.
Mm.
It happens in Hawaii. And so I really do feel like it was sort of, I was guided, being
Yeah.
called to that experience and to that location. And
Well, Hawaii is a really sacred place because it's part of the Lemurian land,
that's
right?
right. That's
So,
right. That's right.
yeah.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Integratron?
Yeah, so that whole story is, it revolves around Giant Rock initially. And Giant Rock is this large, it's about 7 stories high, freestanding boulder. And if you ever go out to like the Joshua Tree National Park, that's the thing that's amazing, is like it's really like this desert land, and all of a sudden there's these clumps of boulders and rocks in all of these places. You kind of like, how does this happen,
Right.
but but Giant Rock, it has this one, there's a little mound of boulders and rocks, but there's just off to the side of it, maybe about 50 yards or 30 to 50 yards just off to the side. There's this freestanding 7-story high boulder. Some people believe that it's the largest freestanding boulder in the world. I haven't done that research in particular, but it's it's a giant rock. It is. And the interesting thing was, prior to World War II in the 1930s, there was an old German miner who was doing mining in that region, and he lived under the rock. So he had dug out and created like a living quarters under this rock, and he would do his mining in that region. If you hike up to a mountain nearby called Goat Mountain, you could probably see one of the entrances to one of the mines he probably worked. And so I'm not sure what he was mining for, but he had some. It was him and his dog, and very reclusive. He I think had a wave radio, but when World War II broke out, that created problems for him, because
Mm.
it is also not that far. That region is in the same area as what has become the 29 Palms military base for the U.S. Military. And so the FBI caught wind of this German miner living under this rock with a
Right.
shortwave radio,
Yeah, not a
and
good story.
not a good context, right? And so they went out there, and he holed himself up in that underneath the rock, wouldn't come out. And it's not clear. There's different versions of the story, but either the FBI may have rolled in some tear gas, or he himself just blew himself up with the dynamite that he had in there. But he and his dog were blown up in that encounter. And so then then that sort of ends Frank Kreitzer's existence in general, but also in terms of John Rock. But there was another gentleman, George Van Tassel, who was in the area, who is an aeronautical engineer. He's a friend of Howard Hughes.
Mm.
He's worked on a variety of planes, so he's much more established uh, person, though very, very quirky and in terms of his interests. But he may have known Frank Kreitzer prior to Frank getting blown up, but he eventually he gets the rights to Giant Rock, so that doesn't own it, but he gets the rights in some ways. And so he goes in and reoccupies that and starts living under the Giant Rock with his wife and 3 daughters.
Oh, wow.
Right. It's a crazy story. And he actually built a little diner just outside of the rock, and that's in that diner his wife would serve people. And the people that would come to Giant Rock were other pilots that George Van Tassel knew. There was a dirt runway, and these private pilots would fly in. There's some say that Howard Hughes would fly in, but different people would fly in, and they would have pie with George and talk to George about all of his ideas and things that were going on. But George also believed that he had the ability, or that he was communicating telepathically with extraterrestrials. And so then George started doing this is again in the probably more in the 1950s. He starts having these UFO conferences out there at Giant Rock. So we're talking about like a 2.5 hour drive, probably from Southern California, the rest of Southern California. Um, and people would come out there, and I think over the course of time, he had about 11,000 people coming out or that came out to Giant Rock, would sit out there with their umbrellas and their cars, and he had built a wooden platform that he could stand up and speak from. And literally have these would essentially be the first UFO conferences probably in the US. And what's interesting, it sounds really crazy, but it's like at the same time, especially with the government now coming out basically saying that, yeah, we have been hiding things, we've been covering
Mm-hmm.
up things. They're not exactly saying what they're covered up, but they are at least acknowledging that. And so it would take us all the way back to this era. And so it's really a crazy story in a sense.
So what is the Integratron used for
Okay,
now?
so I'm sorry for,
Oh,
yeah,
this
I
okay.
get on these sidetracked here, but um so as he's communicating with these extraterrestrials, they instruct him to build this machine. And even though it's a building, it's really more of a machine, and it's a domed wooden building without nails. And it's got these aluminum things coming out, these little tubes coming out that literally are supposed to spin around that building. It's
Mm-hmm.
got an electrostatic charger that is to create some kind of spark, and some magnetometer in the top, and it's got all these things. And this he's being instructed to create this, and what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to, as people walk through it, um, after they walk through it, it's supposed to rejuvenate their body so that, and the goal is, from George Van Tassa's standpoint, is that then people could live, they'll be able to live to like 150 years old, to 150 years, because what he's being told is that people aren't living long enough, so they can't sort of like develop the things that need to get developed to help humanity, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the things that will be helpful. And so this is George Van Tassel's goal, but he has to raise all this money to build it. And but he does. He over several couple decades, he's doing this. He's going out raising money and building it. And he in by 19 the late 1970s, I think around 1977, 78, he's it's pretty much, it's close to being done. um from what I could gather in terms of my read on the story, was that though it still needed the help of the extraterrestrials to somehow um uh
Activated?
gauge it, so that it so if I maybe if they didn't gauge it correctly, it would just fry people, or who
Oh
knows.
gosh.
I mean, who, I don't really know, but it was still going to need some of their help, but it was
Okay.
ready to go. And George uh went down to Pasadena to meet with a publicist, and he ends up kind of mysteriously dying in his uh uh, hotel room of a apparent heart attack. But there are some people that think that there may have been foul play at
Mm-hmm.
play, in that there were possibly forces that didn't want him to bring this forward. Uh,
Right.
yeah, and they would, the people that are speculating along this line are some of his family members, and some of them link it to like that this was also going to have an effect on energy, or access to free energy. And
Oh,
so,
yes, makes
okay, so
sense.
there might be forces that are not interested in
Yeah.
having that available. So that's, it gets, unfortunately, the story gets a bit dark at that point. And so the Integratron then, his second wife takes it over. Some people wonder about her too, in terms of whether she was a part of all of the sort of that darkness around George Van Tassel's death. But eventually the the building. They're not quite sure what to do with it. One story that I think I've heard from the people at the Integratron is that they wanted to turn it into a disco, like and with a light, because it
Uh-huh.
had this dome, and they were trying to figure out, there was a bit of chaos in terms of what happens to the Integratron. Like shortly after George's death, there are people coming in and just taking things out, and
Oh.
so immediately, for its original use, all of that information is lost. That inform it just now it's just this building.
Mm.
um at a certain point, so finally, whoever had control, I believe there was a gentleman named Emil who was beginning to run more so like retreats and things related to the at the Integratron. And there was these three sisters from the East Coast who would come and participate in these things. And they said, if you ever sell this, you have to give us first shot. And so he finally decided to sell it, and these three sisters bought it. Two of them, I think, began to live out there in Joshua Tree area. And so they, in a sense, rejuvenated the building, and it's kind of fixed, kind of uh, brought it back from whatever disrepair that it may have had. And then they turned it into a studio for sound baths. It is amazing. My own experience is, literally had my own leg, just I had an injury, and but because I was leading this group to Joshua Tree National Park, I had to hike, and my daughter
Oh.
like, Dad, I don't know if you should be hiking with that knee, and it's like, I know. Anyway, so I was in a great deal of pain. Went in there, and I came out, and the pain had disappeared. I still had the original injury, but from the stress that I put on it from the few days before hiking, was that had disappeared. And my leg in the sound bath would, all of a sudden my leg just started to vibrate on its own. And
Wow.
so because it's a dome wooden
Mm.
building, and it's the crystal bowls, the resonance from it it's just very powerful. It is a very powerful experience.
So now on the topic of extraterrestrials, my favorite topic. So I understand you conduct CE5 expeditions out at Joshua Tree. Is that accurate?
Right. So also mixed in. So we're going out there. I want to sort of like get people to think about use giant rock and the Integratron as a way for people just to think, to think a lot more expansive in terms of their understanding of extraterrestrials. And then if the first time we went out there, we just toyed with this idea of doing a close encounters of a fifth kind, a CE5. I is the assumption everyone knows what these things
No,
are?
can you explain?
Okay, so Stephen Greer is he has been working in this realm of UFOs and extraterrestrial life uh, probably for over 25 years. He is a emergency room doctor, and he sort of has coined this term called CE5, close encounters of a fifth kind. And basically, in a nutshell, what a close encounter of a first kind is a sighting of a UFO at close range without any interaction with the UFO or its occupants. Okay, so that's CE1.
Mhm.
Okay, close encounters of a second kind is a sighting of a UFO accompanied by physical effects such as interference with electrical equipment, radiation burns, or markings on the ground. And so that's a
Okay.
CE2. Close encounters of a third kind, for people in my generation, we know that from a movie. Um, and that's a sighting of a UFO where occupants or entities are observed either within or near the UFO. And so that's where the movie, has uh, gets its title. And then a close encounter of a fourth kind is a case involving alleged abduction by an extraterrestrial beings or other direct personal encounters with them. And those are CE4s. And then
Okay.
the Stephen Greer coined this, I believe it's Stephen Greer that coined this term, close encounters of a fifth kind is human initiated contact or communication with extraterrestrial beings through consciousness, meditation, or other means.
Mm-hmm.
And so we human beings are initiating. We're trying to, we're no longer just sort of
Observing.
subject observe or subjects to extraterrestrial. We're now like saying, hey, you know come to, we're trying to communicate out.
Right.
So that's what a CE5 is. And Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer created these meditation and these processes that were, I think the person that led it had it on his phone as an app. And so when we were out in Joshua Tree, we had an Airbnb that was conducive to us having the number of people that we had, and we would sit in a circle. Excuse me. We would sit in a circle, and then we would and partly you want to sit in a circle so that you have people looking in 360 degrees up skyward.
Right.
We were
Yeah.
doing it at night, and basically we would play the meditation and we would kind of go along with that. And you want to be aware of, especially out there's a lot of like air, night air traffic because of the military base. You do have planes,
Mm-hmm.
coming over, so you want to be aware of that. But the first time we did it, we just sort of dabbled with it. It was sort of like our first attempt. We were, kind of halfway embarrassed that we're even doing this, right? you know, uh, but at the same time, it was really fun. And some folks felt like maybe they did see some certain lights, kind of come. Um, Stephen Greer, when he has done his event, we had one of the person that was leading our group had gone to one of his events a few months earlier out in Arizona, and he says, what happened in some cases where people were taking video and they didn't see certain things with their eyes at the
Mm.
time, but later when they went back to the video, they could see certain things. Uh, in that experience, that our friend said that there was an actual they saw a craft actually land and things. We didn't have that experience, but he said, um but they say pay attention to not only what you see but what dreams you may have later that evening. Some of our folks talked about having these crazy dreams. um yeah, some people talked about having some really interesting dreams. And then we do have one person who I feel like is very sensitive, very attuned, who has the ability to astral travel, and she really is a wonderful person and a healer in terms of with Reiki and massage. And she had this experience where she felt like this entity came to her, in a sense, in her mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
It came up to her, straight to
Mm.
her face, and said to her, "Who are you?" And then her response back was, "Who are you?" The thing disappeared, or the entity disappeared, then came back. And I can't right off the top, I can't remember what was the next conversation or connection they had. But the way that she would describe what it looked like made me think of this movie called Wake Up. It was a documentary about this guy who all of a sudden started at seeing things, hearing things, and as he's trying to explore all these different modalities of how to understand what he was going through, one of the places he went to was some uh, research center in Rome, where they had him meditate, and they had all these cameras and computers and everything hooked up.
Mm.
And were able to, he described there was this entity that came in and was right in front of him. And the researchers explained to this gentleman that what he was experiencing, and they've seen this before, and it wasn't something to be afraid of, but it was a extraterrestrial entity that was using his consciousness to look into
Oh,
this
our
world,
reality?
yeah, to our
Oh, wow.
reality. And so when I pulled that, I have that little segment on my computer, and I pulled that up and I sent it to the group later after the trip, and I sent it to. I said, did it look like this?" Because they actually were able to generate. They were able to generate an image using the computer, and our friend said, "Yeah, it was like that. It was kind of like that." And so
Oh, wow.
I know I know for a lot of folks that's like really scary, right? I mean, that's like, oh, what do you mean they're using my consciousness, you know? But but again, this is
Well,
really
consciousness is everywhere, all around
right.
us, right?
Consciousness is everywhere,
It's
exactly.
not like it's my consciousness or your
Right,
consciousness.
right,
It's just,
right,
it's the whole field
right,
is
right,
consciousness.
right. But in a sense, as we it's like opening a window to the outdoors, right? You open that windows, not only could you now look outside, but maybe
Y-
whatever's outside could also
Oh,
like sort of
yeah.
look
Yeah.
inside, right?
Yeah.
So
Gosh,
yeah.
that's so fascinating. Okay, let me go to your spiritual life foundation and the programs you offer to the collective. Can you elaborate more on the programs that you have? That
Yeah. So, uh for myself, this is what the Spiritual Life Foundation was. I created it with this sense of, wanting to continue to encourage people um to, as you said earlier, kind of expand their consciousness or explore, grow spiritually, or
mm-hmm,
um, if what whatever they kind of discover, if it's something that drives them, then it's like I want to encourage that, because if it's their passion, if it's something that is good for the common good. And so there's this aspect of just supporting people as they explore their own spirituality, but at the same time is also a place for me to continue to explore the things that I've enjoyed. And I sort of saw it as a little bit of a self reward as well. So some of the programs, so these programs are programs that I'm interested in. We do some things online. I've taught the Enneagram for many years, and so um, it's so we have a monthly session. Actually, there's somebody else that leads the group, and whoever wants to talk about Enneagram, we often will bring in other sort of like modalities and compare it, or connect it to uh, what's going on in terms of the Enneagram. Also have a group in a segment I call Ancient New Way, because I believe that we are living in a time where a lot of the things that were known by the ancients,
mm,
and their perspective, where in terms of what was physical and what was non-physical, that was still all a part of their reality and the way they engaged it. We're only beginning to return to
mm-hmm.
that. And so but so there's some certain ancient truths that are becoming more relevant as we go day by day. And so for me, it's an ancient new way. And so we explore, some of the ancient stuff around pyramids, and just all of
Oh,
these, a lot of
my
these,
favorite topics.
yeah, these ancient concepts that actually maybe have more relevance for us now than they have had in the last couple hundred or several hundred years, because we sort of been, our consciousness has sort of blocked that out, like, those things aren't possible, but it probably has more reality now. um we also, there's folks that, one of the folks is really into, she wanted to bring the awareness of health, and so I support that in terms of, and we call it Kaizen living, doing small things. uh every day you make one positive change,
Mhm.
um that over a period of time you will have made this great turn
Right.
in your health. And so she leads that. And then, oh, there's a gentleman that's very much, his passion is the concern around climate change. And so we support his work and his endeavors. He does a uh Fridays for Future group in Palo Alto here. And so we support that. And then I just have a period where I call open circle, and we just people. This tends to be a fairly small group, but um, we just get together, and I'll bring whatever topics that are of interest to me. A lot of things that I find interesting are, uh, you know around the question of, the sources of Christianity, what was the real spirituality of Jesus, and how it relates
Mm.
to Gnostics, Essenes, those that topic. There's, just all this stuff that I've looked at and researched over the years. Uh, yeah, those are the things that we share and talk about.
And they're all online or both
So
online and in
so
person?
so most, the Enneagram and Ancient New Way is online. um and um and then the other ones are more in person, but sometimes they'll be hybrid depending on the situation or the topic. Sometimes we'll create a hybrid if there's somebody that really wants to tap in. um and I should mention the other one is, we're just starting a new one called Star Talk. And then
Wonderful.
we also have been, like I said, I think I said this earlier, that we are doing these gathering of communities. And the first one was around writing, reflective writing and meditation. This past one, we had a psychic medium come and share. And one of the topics she talked about, pet communication, and also her own ET experience that she had 6 months prior, and then just her own story. And then the next one we have coming up in April, we have a woman who is a channeler,
Mm.
and she'll be sharing her story, and then also probably doing a small channeling session for the group. Yeah, and so
Fascinating. And all your
right,
programs are free? I take it
yeah.
they're free?
Yeah, what I've come to understand is, like, people are like, why do you do that? Or, it's like, um I really feel like, in a sense, I'm just offering people to come to a public playground that is there. And I'm just trying to get them to have some fun, to
Yep.
play with this.
Right.
And I'm not trying to create Disneyland, because if I was trying to create Disneyland, I would have to charge a lot of money for people to, and then they would go and they were like, wow, this is great. But that's really not what I'm doing. I'm really trying to just encourage people, that are maybe more skeptical, or have just, grown up with the norms in which we have grown up with, that tells us that these things don't exist. And I'm just
Mm.
trying to get them, to really expand those ideas a little bit. And then I sort of feel like at that point, then spirit or energy or the universe will take over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what I'm being asked to do is just kind of
Just,
like,
you know, give them the path and then, where they
yeah,
take.
it's like, hey, you could try this, and if you like it, then, yeah, you might want to
Yeah.
climb the rest of the mountain. And so,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So where can people find you?
They could go spiritual life foundation.org. That's probably the easiest. Probably in about a month, I'm going to have an app up.
Oh, wow, nice.
Yeah, and it's Spiritual Life Foundation is also will be the app. I think the app may actually be up, but we only because but it's still at a very beta level, or not even beta level. I mean, literally, I think it was yesterday that I just got a notice saying your app's up. But I give us about a month or so, or I'm not sure when this is being broadcast, but yeah, probably sometime in April
Okay.
2024, uh, will it will be a little bit more set. Yeah,
So
thank you, guys.
in the last few minutes that we have, I have a signature closing question that I ask all my guests. So you ready? I'm going to ask you it,
Sure,
okay?
sure.
Okay. What is your closing message for humanity to help in our collective healing and empowerment?
You know, I really do believe we are at a, I actually think it's a wonderful time. I know people feel the world is just falling apart around us, and but I believe we are, as the ancients often understood, we are in a transitory period. And, some people want to look at it astrologically and call it the shift into the age of Aquarius,
Mm-hmm.
or Edgar Casey talked about an age of enlightenment that we would be moving into. But there's a lot of different ways to describe it. But I do think it is a positive age, and it is and it requires that we have, in a sense, more independence, individual independence, um, more uh, capacity to make choices and have information. And the initial rollout of those dynamics can be quite bumpy because we're not mature enough to really handle and utilize those capabilities in which we now have it, the level in which we now have it. And so obviously the first rollout usually is not so positive. But I think sort of this bigger picture is that it's it's a part of the ongoing process of evolution towards this enlightenment period
Mm-hmm.
of enlightenment. And so I think that's the hope that I have that keeps me going forward is and I really think it's I really do think that's what's going on right now, and despite all of the craziness that we experience.
Oh, thank you. That I so resonate with that. I just want to add, you know, the old paradigm needs to, kind of go away so that the new can take its place, right? So
Right.
I believe that is what is happening too. And so I resonate with your message.
Right. As a friend of mine said, but those old paradigms are going to die hard, and
Yeah.
but that's a part of that's why it feels
Hmm.
so chaotic,
Yeah.
because those old paradigms aren't able to carry us into a period of enlightenment. But in the meantime, though, they had served as a grounding base to alleviate so much fear that people have had. And but we're so that's and you take that away, then a lot of people have so much fear.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I really think that's kind of what we're dealing with in this era, is that there's people are trying to hang on because they're so afraid. And so yeah.
Yeah, but we have people like you who's helping to expand the consciousness of
Yeah.
others. That's
Well,
phenomenal.
we'll see. But no,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
actually I'm very hopeful. I mean, yeah, and meeting you, and I mean, it's like, yeah, it's encouraging.
Yeah, the
So,
universe always guides us to the right, so-called right people, most aligned
right.
people.
That's
So
right.
I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, Roger, for taking the time to spend with us today.
Well, thank you, Priscilla, for what you're doing, and just for giving me this opportunity to share. This really was a lot of fun.
Thank you. And for everybody who's watching and listening, thank you for your time. And until next time, bye for now.
Bye.